5 months pregnant, I stayed home to cook an elaborate feast at Daniel's request. Had invited his friends over to celebrate his birthday. During a game of truth or dare, Susie deliberately lost and chose truth. She pointed at my massive baby bump and sneered, "Luce's stretch marks are so ugly, like a swarm of maggots crawling all over her skin." The words hit me like a slap. I froze, glancing at the others, my face burning with shame. The humiliation gnawed at my last shred of self-respect. Struggling to maintain composure, I demanded an apology. Daniel's face darkened. "Susie was just joking," he snapped. "Why do you have to take it so seriously? If you're upset, don't eat." That night a storm raged outside as fiercely as the turmoil inside me. Wearing nothing but my thin pajamas, I was shoved out of the house. Rain soaked through the fabric almost instantly, and as I stood shivering, I heard Daniel's smug voice behind the door. "She's pregnant and still thinks she's some beauty queen," he said, laughing with his friends. "So fat, who else would want her besides me? Just wait. She'll be back on her knees begging to come in within 10 minutes. But this time he was wrong. That I turned away without hesitation, my wet hair plastered to my face, and headed downstairs. Hailing a cab, I directed the driver to the hospital. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I scheduled an abortion that very night. A man like him doesn't deserve to be a father. There was a doctor on duty that night. When I told her I wanted an abortion, she hesitated, her voice unsure. "You're already 5 months along. Are you certain you want to go through with this? Does the father know?" "The father is dead," I replied without missing a beat. Her eyes softened with sympathy, though she didn't press further. Given that Daniel had never once accompanied me to a prenatal appointment, and the fact we weren't officially married, she had no reason to doubt me. After confirming my decision multiple times, she scheduled the procedure for 2 days later. By the time I returned home, I had been as cautious as possible, but the torrential rain made it impossible to stay dry. My thin pajamas clung to my skin, drenched and freezing. The wind cut through me like shards of ice. But I barely felt it. My body was numb, and so was my mind. When I opened the door to our apartment, the party was long over, but the mess it had left behind was catastrophic. Daniel was lounging on the couch, a cigarette between his fingers. At the sound of the door, his face darkened, and without a word he picked up a pillow and hurled it at me. "Lucy, all this drama over Susie making a joke? Was running off into the night really necessary? A joke?" I repeated inwardly, my throat tightening. "She's just a kid," he continued, his tone accusatory. "He doesn't know any better. And you're about to be a mom. Why are you even arguing with her?" "A joke. Saying my stretch marks looked like maggots crawling on my skin was a joke. Calling me fat and disgusting was a joke. Every word Susie spat out, every insult aimed at me, was nothing but a harmless joke in Daniel's eyes." "Susie's just a little girl," he said, as if that excused it all. But he conveniently forgot that before I married him I had been just a girl too. I was barely older than Susie, only a single year. And yet, he demanded I shoulder the weight of everything. His temper, his cruelty, and now even his friends' venomous words. Every time Susie mocked me, I saw Daniel leap to her defense without hesitation. Together they dragged me through the dirt, stripping away what little dignity I had left. "Susie's not wrong, you know," he added, his smirk infuriating. "Why are you so petty? Can't you take a little honesty?" "Honesty?" I was furious, devastated. But most of all I was done. Once I would have argued with him, desperate to salvage the scraps of respect I thought I deserved in this marriage. But now I saw no point. Fighting for something so rotten, so far gone, wasn't worth the effort. The pillow had struck my back, hitting me square in the waist. The dull ache throbbed, but I stayed silent, clutching the doorframe for balance. My lack of response must have seemed like submission to Daniel, because he grinned, his voice laced with satisfaction. "What are you standing there for? Don't you see how messy the place is? Get to cleaning already." I glanced down. The floor was littered with evidence of their celebration, spilled liquor mixed with streaks of cake frosting, the chaos they'd left behind after shoving me out into the storm. I wasn't welcome when they were laughing and cheering, but now that there was a mess to clean, I was the only one expected to handle it. As I decided to ignore the chaos in the living room and head straight to the bedroom, I twisted the doorknob and froze. Susie stepped out wearing one of my most delicate, now ill-fitting nightgowns. Her lips curved into a mock-surprised smile. "Oh, Lucy, I didn't realize you'd come back. I didn't have anything to wear, so I borrowed this." You're pregnant now, so it's not like it fits you anymore. You don't mind, do you? I frowned, my gaze darting to Daniel, still lounging on the couch. He didn't even bother to look at me, his voice cold as ice. It was pouring outside. I couldn't let a young girl risk her safety, so I told her to stay the night. You're not seriously going to pick a fight over this, are you? He spoke to me, his 5 months pregnant, rain-soaked wife, with absolute indifference. Yet he was so tender and protective toward his so-called sister. Disappointment swelled in my chest, heavy and suffocating. I couldn't muster the energy to argue anymore. Without a word, I entered the bedroom, closing the door behind me. Daniel's fleeting look of surprise as I left went unnoticed. I thought, with Sussy here, had have no reason to bother me. But as I lay in bed, his footsteps crept into the room. His hands, warm and insistent, found their way to my waist. He whispered softly, almost apologetically, "Still hurting? I cleaned up the house already." Before I could respond, he continued, his tone somewhere between reprimand and coaxing. "Lucy, why can't you just let it go? You embarrassed me tonight in front of all our friends. Sussy was only joking and you got so upset. It's not good for the baby. Come on, be reasonable." I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. "You still care about the baby?" His hand froze on my waist. After a moment, he leaned closer, his lips moving toward mine. But I stopped him, guiding his hand to my belly, where the stretch marks traced across my skin like scars of my sacrifice. The moment his fingers touched the ridges, he recoiled as if burned. I saw the flicker of disgust in his eyes before he quickly tried to mask it. He opened his mouth, perhaps to apologize, but his phone buzzed. The sound shattered the silence, followed by Susie's tearful voice on the other end. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I must made Lucy upset. I shouldn't have stayed. I'll just go home." Oh. Her voice cut off, replaced by a sharp cry. And then the call disconnected. Daniel's demeanor shifted instantly. Panic overtook him as he grabbed his coat and yanked me out of bed. "If something happens to Sussy tonight, I swear I'll never forgive you," he barked, dragging me toward the door. "How is this my fault?" I protested, struggling to free myself. But he didn't care. He shoved me into the car, ignoring my protests and the fact that I was still in my thin, damp pajamas. The cold wind bit into my skin and I couldn't stop shivering or sneezing. Daniel remained oblivious, his focus entirely on the road. The gas pedal pressed firmly to the floor. 10 minutes later, we found her. Sussy was sitting on the roadside, her ankle twisted, tears streaming down her face. Daniel leapt out of the car, cradling her as if she were made of glass. Without hesitation, he sped to the hospital, barking orders at me the entire way. "This is your fault. If anything happens to her, I'll make sure you regret it." While Sussy was being examined, the stress and exhaustion of the night finally caught up with me. A sharp pain radiated through my abdomen, forcing me to clutch the wall for support. My forehead was slick with sweat as I tried to steady my breathing. Eventually, Daniel noticed me, his expression hardening. "Stop putting on a show. Did you fall too, or are you just trying to steal the spotlight from Sussy?" His words stung more than the pain in my stomach. "I can't believe how selfish you are, Lucy," he spat. "You act so sweet, but deep down you're just bitter and petty." Before I could respond, a doctor walked by, her gaze shifting between the two of us. Her face creased with confusion as she hesitated. "What's your relationship?" she asked, her tone wary. Panic clawed at my chest as I tried to think of an explanation. The doctor's earlier words replayed in my mind. "You said the father was dead." But before I could respond, a sharp cry rang out from the examination room. Susie's voice, full of pain and frailty, called for Daniel. When Daniel turned and disappeared into the room, I let out a bitter laugh to myself. "It's fine," I said softly, turning to the doctor. "That's my brother. He and his wife had a fight tonight." The doctor sighed, her concern evident but restrained. "You've scheduled the procedure, but at this stage of pregnancy, you need to be especially careful. Go home and rest. You don't want anything to happen before the operation." I nodded, watching her walk away, her white coat fluttering as she disappeared down the corridor. The ache in my chest swelled as I stood there alone, wishing I could sink into the ground and disappear. I thought about sitting down to catch my breath. But before I could, Daniel reappeared, grabbing me roughly and dragging me into the hospital room. He pointed at Sussy lying dramatically on the bed and barked, "Apologize to her." "What?" I asked, stunned. "Lucy, if you hadn't been so difficult tonight, Sussy would have stayed home safe and sound. Now she's been hit by a car, All because of your tantrum. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at his shameless accusation. This is my fault. Did you not hear the things she said to me tonight? She insulted me. She insulted your child. Or are you too stupid to realize that? It was the first time in 5 years that ID looked at him with such cold disdain, Daniel's face twisted with anger, his eyes bloodshot. He opened his mouth to retort, but Susie interrupted, her voice trembling with practiced sorrow. I'm sorry, it's all my fault. I was only trying to lighten the mood. I didn't mean to upset Lucy. Please don't fight because of me. I'll quit my job and leave the city once I'm better. You'll never have to see me again. Tears streamed down her face as she delivered her martyr act. Daniel's jaw clenched. His voice low and furious. I'm only going to say this one more time, Lucy. Apologize to her. Stop holding grudges against a young girl. I've told you this 1,000 times before. That I stared at him, unflinching, my expression as icy as my resolve. Without a word, I turned and walked out of the room behind me. His furious voice echoed down the hallway. If you leave now, don't bother coming back. Lucy, you'll come crawling back with the baby soon enough. Tears blurred my vision as I hurried through the hospital's corridors. Ignoring the curious stares of strangers, the rain outside was still relentless, soaking through my thin clothes in moments. The hospital was in a remote area, and despite waiting for what felt like an eternity, I couldn't hail a cab. Somehow my baby seemed to sense my struggle, settling quietly in my belly for the first time all night. The stillness was oddly comforting. When the rain finally eased, I walked 3 miles to the nearest hotel, arriving soaked, exhausted, and utterly drained. It was 4 in the morning by the time I finally laid down. Unable to sleep, I opened my phone and checked Susie's social media. As expected, she had just posted something new. The photo showed Daniel's hands massaging her swollen ankle with the caption, "Sweet words mean nothing compared to tender actions. The one who loves you never complains about the effort. Thank you." The post had already garnered numerous likes, mostly from Daniel's friends, the same people who never respected me but doted on Susie. It wasn't hard to imagine Daniel's role in this dynamic, the things he must have told them about me over the years. He must have painted me as the nagging, undeserving wife, and they had readily believed him. Just as I was about to close the app, a string of comments popped up that I thought someone once said he'd never lift a finger for a woman. Looks like Susie changed that. Must be her princess charm. Each comment was like a dagger, reminding me how cheap and pathetic my role in this relationship had become. 5 years together, and we'd never even filed for marriage. I was 5 months pregnant and he treated me like a burden. Of course he didn't treasure me. Why would he? I let out a hollow laugh. Closing the app and finally letting exhaustion pull me under. For the first time in years, I turned off my phone completely before falling asleep. When I woke up at noon, I saw his flood of messages. You didn't come home? Where the hell are you? Send me your location. Lucy, are you ignoring me? Don't push it. Susie isn't even mad at you anymore. She even wants to take you to the movies. Take this chance to apologize and let it go. Stop being so difficult. His tone was as condescending as ever, as though he were offering me some grand mercy. I rubbed my temples. Exhausted even after hours of sleep. It was time to end this farce. Without hesitation, I sent him my hotel address. It was time to lay everything bare. The car pulled up in front of the hotel and the passenger side window rolled down. Daniel's eyes swept over me, his expression immediately darkening with displeasure. You went out in a bathrobe? Are you trying to make yourself look pitiful? He scoffed. Susie spent the whole night defending you and now you're starting trouble again. I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. These last few days had drained me completely. The nightgown got soaked in the rain yesterday. What else was I supposed to wear? The retort caught in his throat and he fell silent. Seeing this, Susie smiled sweetly, her eyes glinting with feigned innocence. I told you Lucy's not that bad. This must all be a misunderstanding. Let's clear it up. Oh, and Daniel brought me a jacket earlier. Why don't you try it on? It might fit you for now. I forced a smile, my expression cold. No need. You've worn it already. And I don't like wearing dirty clothes. Her smile faltered for a split second before she recovered, staying firmly in the front seat. With no intention of moving, I climbed into the back without a word. Daniel turned, likely ready to scold me, but paused when he saw my calm demeanor. He seemed momentarily confused by my lack of reaction. Susie, feigning belated realization, added, "Sorry, Lucy. My foot still hurt and there's more room up front." I hope you don't mind sitting in the back. I felt Daniel's gaze on me through the rearview mirror, scrutinizing my expression. But I ignored him, leaning back and closing my eyes. The drive was filled with Susie's chatter, her attempts to convince me to change out of my robe thinly veiled as concern. She was clearly taking jabs at my unkempt appearance, but I had neither the energy nor the interest to engage. Eventually, even Daniel grew irritated with her comments. "Let it go," he snapped. "Who cares what she's wearing? She's pregnant, no one's paying attention to her outfit anyway." His dismissive tone gave Susie reason to smirk, her eyes flashing triumphantly. They spent the rest of the ride chatting about their plans for future outings and reminiscing about the party, their conversation brimming with shared memories that excluded me entirely. I didn't mind. It gave me the quiet I needed to rest. Daniel, however, kept glancing at me in the mirror. My silence seemed to unnerve him, as though he expected an outburst that never came. When we arrived at the theater, he turned to me, his voice softer but still commanding. "Stay close to me inside. The theater's dark, hold on to me if you need to." I almost laughed at the irony. Thanks to Susie, I was getting one last chance to sit beside him for a farewell movie. As we entered, Susie tugged Daniel's arm and pulled him far ahead of me, her excitement palpable. Once again I found myself alone, wandering through the rows until I located my seat. When I sat down, I saw Daniel at the far end twisting a bottle cap for Susie under the dim lights. When he noticed me, a flicker of guilt crossed his face. He leaned closer, his voice low. "Susie got a little impatient earlier and I didn't think to check on you. Don't be upset, okay?" I gave him a small, indifferent smile. "I'm not upset. Not this time and not ever again. After the movie, don't leave right away. I have something to tell you." It didn't seem like he fully registered my words because Susie immediately interrupted, asking for help opening her popcorn. He turned back to her, his attention completely absorbed once more. Halfway through the movie, disaster struck. With a loud crack, a steel beam overhead gave way and plummeted toward the seats below. The audience had mere seconds to react. People ducked and shielded themselves instinctively. But I, pregnant and frozen in shock, couldn't move. My body broke out in a cold sweat as the beam crashed down. When it finally hit, the beam lodged itself just inches in front of me. A fraction closer and it would have crushed my stomach. Amid the chaos, Daniel's focus was elsewhere. He shielded Susie with his entire body, ensuring she remained unharmed as the emergency lights flickered on. He didn't even glance my way. Instead, he scooped Susie into his arms and rushed her out of the theater. The rescue team eventually found me and helped me out, their hands steadying my trembling frame. I looked around outside, but there was no sign of Daniel. The rescue team insisted on taking me to the hospital for a checkup, worried about potential complications. Exhausted, I agreed. When I finally reached the emergency room, Daniel was queuing up to pay for Susie, who was sitting on a chair in the corner. "Lucy, that was such a close call. You're really lucky." Susie's voice broke through the haze, but her usual sweetness was gone. Her tone was icy, almost menacing, as if mocking my survival. "You're not so bad yourself," I shot back, refusing to let her get the upper hand, though my eyes stayed glued to Daniel's back as he paid at the counter. His indifference was the final blow, shattering the last fragments of my heart. Susie reached out and placed her hand on my belly, a cold, calculating smile curling on her lips. I recoiled, slapping her hand away. A deep unease surged through me, but I couldn't react fast enough. With one swift motion, Susie grabbed my wrist and flung herself backward toward the stairs. My bracelet snapped, beads scattering across the floor. Her body hit the stairs with a sickening thud, and in an instant Daniel charged past me. "Move," he barked, shoving me aside so forcefully I stumbled backward. My feet slipped and I tumbled down the staircase. The sharp edge of a step slammed into my stomach. The impact so severe it left me gasping in agony. I crumpled at the base of the stairs, every nerve in my body screaming in pain. My vision blurred and my voice barely rose above a whisper. "Daniel, help me." But he didn't even glance my way. He scooped Susie into his arms and ran straight into the emergency room, his focus entirely on her. As my consciousness flickered, the doctor from last night appeared at my side, shouting for assistance. I could hear her frantic voice through the haze. "Move her to surgery. She's bleeding heavily, get the induction team ready. She already scheduled the procedure, so let's do this now." Those words gave me a strange sense of peace. It's finally over. The anesthesia coursed through my veins, and just before I succumbed to the numbness, I faintly heard Daniel's voice, panicked and frantic for the first time. "Where is my wife? Where are you taking her?" "Wife?" I wanted to laugh but couldn't summon the strength. I only felt pity for myself, for this child, for the years I'd wasted on a man who never deserved them. Daniel's voice grew louder outside the operating room, yelling at anyone who would listen. "Get out of my way. Where's my wife? She fell right here in your hospital. Where did you take her?" A staff member tried to calm him. "Sir, please. There must be some misunderstanding. The woman in surgery said her husband was already dead." Daniel's voice broke. "What kind of joke is that? I'm her husband." "Then please provide your marriage certificate," the nurse replied firmly. A heavy silence followed. I and the quiet of anesthesia-induced dreams. I was transported 5 years back. The Daniel in my memory was kind, awkward, but filled with genuine care. I remembered standing on the doorstep of my parents' house, their eyes filled with worry as they prepared to leave for Germany. "Lucy, are you sure about this? Once we leave, you'll be all alone here," my mother had said, her voice heavy with concern. Daniel had stood beside me, his expression solemn but determined. He pounded his chest with confidence as he made his vow. "Don't worry. I swear on my life that I'll take care of Lucy. She'll be the most important person in my life. I promise you I'll make her happy." Those words had been enough for me back then. I stayed behind for him. I gave up my career, my ambitions, and my independence to become his support system. I cooked, cleaned, and kept our home running while he pursued his dreams. When he attended endless business dinners and late-night parties, I waited by the door, hoping for the sound of his keys jingling. When times were tough, I survived on instant oatmeal for months to save money for his startup. And through it all, I sent fake photos of a perfect life to my parents in Germany to ease their worries. Those days lasted for 2 years. Back then, Daniel still cared about me. He still understood the sacrifices I made, the struggles I endured. On every holiday, he found small ways to surprise me, not expensive gifts but thoughtful gestures filled with sincerity. He'd say, "Once my company takes off, it'll make you the happiest woman in the world. We'll have the wedding you deserve, apply for our marriage certificate, and live the life we've always dreamed of. And one day we'll have a beautiful child. It'll prove to your parents that you made the right choice." Those days were hard, but they were also the happiest I'd ever been. Now Daniel's company has succeeded, but along with it came a version of him I barely recognize. He's busier than ever, and the nights I spend waiting for him stretch endlessly. Sometimes I wait until dawn only to receive a single dismissive text. Other times there's no message at all. He tells me that's just how it is. No successful man revolves around his family. The promises he made are now just memories I cling to alone. For 5 years I convinced myself it was fine, that he just needed time, that things would get better. But this pregnancy changed everything. He must have realized I wouldn't leave him now, and he started pushing further, testing the limits of how much I would endure. It was then I discovered how little I meant to him in front of his friends. One drunken night, I heard him bragging about how easily he'd won me over. How I now cooked for him, cleaned for him, and was about to bear his child. His friends laughed, their eyes mocking as they looked at me. I sat there, swallowing my pride, convincing myself that as long as he stayed by my side, nothing else mattered. But when he brought Susie into our home, my fragile self-delusion shattered. He called her his secretary, insisted she was young, and that he treated her like a little sister. But I didn't believe a word of it. I watched him with her, his tenderness, his attentiveness, the care in his actions that he hadn't shown me in years. He acted like a lovesick teenager, cautious and earnest in a way I'd forgotten he could be. I knew then that I was no longer part of his world. But I couldn't let go. How could I? I'd given him the best years of my life. And now I was carrying our child. I became the very thing I used to despise, a bitter, angry woman who screamed and argued. I demanded to know what was going on between them, though deep down I already knew. Every fight drained what little was left of our relationship. And then came that night, the party, Susie's cruel jabs, and Daniel's endless excuses for her. It was the final straw, the one that broke me completely. "Mom, I finally understand what you meant all those years ago. But it's too late now." The surgery was far from smooth. The fall had been too brutal, the impact too severe. The hospital steps were steep, and by the time I reached the operating table, the child inside me was already a stillborn. Even before the procedure began, I started hemorrhaging. I could hear the panicked voices of the doctors calling for blood transfusions. The blood bank is out of stock. A nurse replied urgently. For a fleeting moment I thought maybe it's better this way. Maybe I should just let go. I couldn't imagine how I would face my parents after the abortion. One wrong choice had nearly consumed my entire youth. But then someone donated blood, someone with just enough kindness to keep me alive. Slowly I felt warmth returning to my body. The doctors sighing in relief as they stabilized me. "Shall make it," one of them said. "Let's proceed with the induction." They cut me open, the surgical tools cold against my skin. Those stretch marks Susie had ridiculed as crawling maggots would never look the same again. This time they would scar deeper, permanently marking my body with the cost of this nightmare. Finally, the child was removed from my body, lifeless and silent. When they started stitching me up, the anesthesia began to wear off and I passed out from the pain. The next time I opened my eyes, I was in a standard hospital bed. The doctor stood vigil by my side, carefully monitoring my condition. The moment she saw me awake, she leaned forward, her voice a mix of confusion and urgency. "Ms. Lucy, when you scheduled the abortion you said your husband had passed away. So who is the man outside claiming to be your husband?" I turned my head slowly, following her gaze. Through the glass window of the hallway I saw Daniel standing there, his eyes bloodshot, his figure slumped. "I don't know him," I said flatly. "Maybe there's something wrong with him mentally. But he donated a significant amount of blood for your surgery," the doctor pressed. "Our blood bank was empty, and he gave nearly half of what his body could handle." I forced a bitter smile, my voice sharp. "Should have. I fell down the stairs because of him. This is the least he can do." Seeing my exhaustion, the doctor hesitated but eventually left the room. She must have spoken to Daniel in the hallway because I saw him gesturing wildly, pleading with her as if trying to explain himself. After what felt like forever, he finally left. The memory of him pushing me down the stairs replayed in my mind, vivid and unrelenting. Just the thought of him made me nauseous. I thought that would be the end of us, a messy, inexplicable ending to a relationship that never should have begun. I even booked a ticket to Germany, ready to return to my parents and leave this nightmare behind. But Daniel showed up again. This time he held an old, faded wedding photo. It wasn't a real wedding photo, just one wed taken for fun in front of a cheap backdrop when we were young and broke. He had used it to convince the doctor, who reluctantly brought him to my room. Before leaving, the doctor gave me a look of pity, as if apologizing for what she had done. I lay still, my eyes closed, pretending I hadn't noticed him. I felt his gaze on me, heavy and searching, before he finally broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he began, his voice low. I was too anxious earlier. I didn't think it would end up like this. Susie's health has always been fragile and I was worried something might happen to her. I didn't know how to explain it to her parents if anything went wrong. He paused as if expecting me to respond. But I stayed silent. I swear, he continued when I rushed over, "I didn't see you. I would never hurt you, Lucy. The baby was my child too. I wouldn't have done anything to harm it." His words blurred together, a stream of excuses that rang hollow. The surgical pain throbbed beneath the layers of gauze, sharp and unrelenting. But his words hurt more. He had gone through so much trouble to get here, yet the first thing out of his mouth was a defense of his own actions. A plea for understanding. Not once did he ask if I was in pain. Not once did he ask how my body was holding up. Not once did he ask where the baby was. I looked at his tense, anxious face and suddenly laughed. Tears streamed down my cheeks, soaking into the collar of my hospital gown. My chest felt unbearably cold, as though my heart had frozen over. "What's wrong, Lucy?" Daniel's voice trembled, his worry evident. "Don't scare me. Are you in pain? We'll call the doctor right now, just hold on." "Wait." I stopped him, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. He froze, staring at me with confusion. "There's no need," I said softly. "Let's break up, Daniel." "What?" His expression twisted into disbelief. "I am tired. I won't blame her and I won't blame you. But please don't ever appear in front of me again. Not in this lifetime, not in the next. I never want to see you again." The finality in my words seemed to knock the air out of him. He stared at me, stunned, as though he couldn't comprehend what I'd just said. Moments passed before the shrill ring of his phone broke the silence. He glanced at the screen and his face grew uneasy. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Go on. I told you you're free now. Be with whoever you want, it's none of my business anymore. 5 years of love. and our goodbye didn't even need words of closure. We had started hastily and ended messily, without grace or dignity. I thought he would rush out immediately to answer Susie's call. But this time he hesitated. He declined the call and turned back to me. I know I let you down today, he said, his voice low and strained. But I promise this was the last time. I'll talk to Susie and make everything clear. She's just like family to me, Lucy. Sometimes, when I see her, it reminds me of a younger you. I couldn't help but want to protect her. I looked at him, incredulous, a mocking smile spreading across my face. Daniel, I'm still alive. You don't need to use someone else as an excuse to mourn me. Don't use me as a justification for your infidelity. It's disgusting. For the first time he seemed genuinely flustered. Lucy, how can you say that? You know I'm not that kind of person. In 5 years, when have I ever betrayed you? I didn't answer and he pressed on, his voice rising in frustration. This whole situation happened because you were being petty. If you had just let it go, none of this would have escalated. I didn't want things to turn out like this, Lucy. I had never felt this exhausted. His words washed over me like dirty water, accusations that I didn't even care to refute. Think whatever you want, I said, my tone flat. If you believe a mother being insulted doesn't deserve to react, if you think I'd stoop so low as to harm someone else, then fine. Take this as your opportunity. Let's end it. His face twisted in disbelief, his lips parting as if to argue, but the phone rang again. This time he didn't hesitate. He shot me a disappointed look, then left without another word. The moment he was gone, I pulled out my phone and texted my parents. I'll come to Germany in 2 weeks. This time, I'm not coming back. It didn't take long for my mother to respond. She must have sensed something was wrong because her reply was almost immediate, followed by a phone call. I stared at the screen, tears welling up again. I couldn't answer. If I did, she would hear the pain in my voice, see through the weak lies I had been telling her for years. The phone rang and rang, cutting off only to start again. After several attempts, my mother finally stopped calling. Taking a deep breath, I sent her another text. I was eating when you called. Sorry I didn't answer. I just miss you and Dad. I think it's time I spent more time with family. You were right about Daniel. We're not right for each other. I should have listened to you. Her reply came quickly, confirming the details of my arrival. She promised they'd pick me up at the airport. For the first time in what felt like forever, warmth spread through my chest. The sterile, lonely hospital room didn't feel as suffocating anymore. The nurse came in to change my bandages, glancing at me hesitantly. Miss, who is that man outside? He showed us a wedding photo, but he's been in another woman's room all day taking care of her. I gave a faint smile, my voice dry and brittle. It's just an old photo from when I modeled. Don't take it seriously. We're just co-workers. As soon as the words left my mouth, I froze. When had I become like this? When had I started spinning lies so effortlessly? The old me would have despised this version of myself, bitter, broken, and dishonest. But here I was, clinging to my last scraps of pride, weaving falsehoods just to avoid anyone's pity. The nurse left quietly, and I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling emptier than ever that night as I rested alone in the dimly lit hospital room. I thought I heard Daniel arguing with the doctor outside. My wife lost our child in your hospital. You need to take responsibility. He snapped, his tone sharp and relentless. Where were your nurses? Why didn't anyone notice sooner? My child could have been saved, and now my wife nearly died. This is on you. The doctor, clearly losing patience, replied coldly. Sir, please calm down. Lucy had scheduled the induction 2 days prior. Even without the fall, the baby couldn't have been saved. There was a pause, then the doctor continued with an edge in their voice. Also, when your wife fell, our staff witnessed someone pulling her toward the stairs. If you don't believe me, you're welcome to call the police and review the surveillance footage. The sound of a door opening startled me, and through the faint light I saw Daniel enter the room. His face was tense, his eyes shadowed with a mix of emotions I couldn't decipher. I shifted uncomfortably in bed, furrowing my brow. Without a word, he walked over, adjusting the blanket around me and carefully drawing the curtains shut. He lingered for a moment before murmuring, almost inaudibly, I'm sorry. The apology was so faint, carried away by the night breeze, that I wasn't even sure I'd heard it. The next morning when I opened my eyes, Daniel was gone. The only trace of him was the insulated container of steaming porridge left by my bedside. I asked the nurse to throw it away and ordered breakfast from the hospital cafeteria instead. She hesitated, her gaze flickering with something unspoken, before finally blurting out, "You probably don't know yet, do you? That man, he reported someone to the police first thing this morning." I looked up from my meal, unfazed. "Who did he report?" "The person who tried to push you down the stairs, of course," she said. Curious, I unlocked my phone and opened the news. Sure enough, a photo of Susie, her face twisted in rage, had made headlines. The reports detailed how her actions had been caught on camera, and her attempt to feign innocence had collapsed under the weight of evidence. The comments section buzzed with speculation about the case, with many condemning her as a murderer and predicting a hefty prison sentence. But as I read, I felt nothing. Even if Susie were convicted and locked away for years, it wouldn't bring back my child. It wouldn't erase the trauma of that night. There was a vast difference between choosing to terminate a pregnancy and being violently forced into it. That day I hadn't truly wanted the abortion. I'd been driven to the decision out of anger, Daniel's favoritism, his cold indifference. It had been a desperate cry for some semblance of control. But now none of it mattered. The nurse, sensing my silence, seemed uncomfortable. She muttered a quick goodbye and left, leaving my breakfast on the table. I ate slowly, mechanically. Before setting the tray aside, Daniel returned later in the day, rushing into the room as if he had something urgent to say. But when he saw me, his words faltered. Without speaking, he sank into the chair beside my bed and stayed there in silence. It was as though we'd entered into an unspoken agreement. He wouldn't bring up what had happened, and I wouldn't ask. The silence between us wasn't awkward, but it wasn't comforting either. It was the kind of quiet that settled over a once familiar bond that had unraveled beyond repair. Throughout the night, my phone vibrated relentlessly with Daniel's apologies. Message after message filled the screen, but I had no desire to read them. By dawn, I heard the door close as he left for work. I got out of bed, washed up, and called a cab to take me to the airport. There was nothing else to say, nothing else to do. I left behind a single note: "Never see me again. This is the end for us." The apartment we had lived in, the home he had bought after his business took off, wasn't tied to me in any way. Leaving it behind was surprisingly easy. Letting go of this relationship, this man, was far simpler than I'd expected. Maybe it was because I'd already experienced too many moments of disappointment. Each one had chipped away at my love, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to salvage. Now I'd done everything I could. There was no regret, no lingering doubt. I had given him my all, and that was enough. As the plane took off, I looked out at the clouds and silently said goodbye to the person I used to be. From this moment on, I promised myself I would rebuild my life. Every day from now would be better than the last. And I knew deep in my heart that it would be. And that's my story. If you've made it this far, thank you. I hope my journey inspires you, even just a little. If you have thoughts to share, leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. There are still many more in spring stories like mine for women like us. I'll be back tomorrow with another one. See you then.